Hello friends, welcome to this lecture number 11 on the course on consumer psychology. Now this is section 2 of consumer psychology, and as I discussed that in section number 1 of this course, we discussed consumer behavior and factors related to it, and also how consumers make decisions. Now, the last lecture, lecture number 10, was the first lecture in this section where we are focusing on psychological factors, psychology related factors which affect consumer behavior or which determines consumer behavior. And in the last lecture we looked at what is consumer perception. So, basically in terms of what is perception first of all, how does it progress, and something related to organization and the organization and interpretation function of perception. We looked at those stimulus features which actually help in stimulus perception or product perception. We looked at individual factors, for example, thresholds, we looked at Weber's law, we looked at stimulus discrimination and generalization, and the idea of just noticeable differences. These are individual factors or person related factors which affect consumer perception of how consumer sees a product or benefits. We also looked at the Gestalt theory of how a consumer perceives a particular product, and we looked at the order of what a form is, what a stimulus background is, and what is the idea of pranks and basic Gestalt laws, and also individual factors within the Gestalt which actually help in perception of product. Now, from there we moved on to something called categorization, consumer categorization. So, once a consumer has information about a product into the market, he needs to categorize this information, and we looked at two different ways, basically 4 different ways of categorization. We looked at analytical categorization, which is based on the fact that some parameters are used, and based on this parameter the categorization of new stimulus that you are seeing or any stimulus that you are seeing is equivalent to a mental set. Why is this necessary? Why this categorization is necessary? Because any product that you see, it has to be mapped onto mental representation, only then you will understand that this product is what you want. So, I am seeing a cell phone, the cell phone which is in my hand has to be mapped onto a mental representation of the cell phone that I have, only then I will understand that this is a cell phone, because object recognition is another part of perception, right. So, you have to recognize the object. That is how you differentiate between a cell phone and an iPad and an iPhone and several different factors. So, that has to be there. So, one way is analytical categorization, and there we saw that based on some parameters the categorization is done. Then we saw the non-analytical form of categorization, where we look at the holistic features. We just do not see certain features of the product and map them or categorize them onto mental sets. What we do is the whole feature of or the whole product itself is seen, and that is how they are categorized. So, the phone as a whole, not certain features of it. Then we looked at abstraction and prototype, which is another way of doing this categorization. And further than that, we looked at something called consumer attributions. And so, as I define attribution is basically giving reason to whatever happens, and we give an example there. For example, why is attribution necessary? Because consumers have to give reasons. Something fails, right. So, a camera fails, a shutter speed fails of a camera, right, or a camera has given you very good photographs, and so you attribute to the shutter speed, and so that may be the reason. Or some kind of attributions are also related to the fact, or sometimes attributions are also related to the fact that certain when you go into the market, the person who's the sales manager who's working with you, the sales assistant who's dealing with you, he comments onto you, he comments about your dress, and so how you take this comment decides about that particular person, or gives a view about that, not only about that person but about that particular product, the whole product group, the whole brand, and the whole company itself. And so, this attribution is very important. And similar to that, we also looked at something called product and service perception. So, perceptions about product and services, and so last class we were discussing this only. So, basically we are looking at what is product and service perception, and it is the inferences that the consumer make about products and services, attributing their performance to specific qualities and features. So, basically how does a product work, or what is the reason why it works, and that kind of a thing. And we also looked at there are something called internal versus external attribution, in referred to as attributions of locus of control. And sometimes we believe that why a product failed, or why a product passed, or why I selected a product, or why I do not select a product based on external and internal reasoning. So, sometimes it is that the certain features of the product were there, and because of that I bought the product, or that made me like the product. And sometimes it happens that there are certain features of the product, certain features inside of me which make me like the product. So, it is not something which the product has to offer, it is a feeling that I get by looking at the product, and that is why I bought the product. And so, this is external and internal attributions which are there. So, what is the reason why I buy the product? It could be an external reason, a product related feature, a reason which is outside of you, or it could be internal reason, a feeling, positive feeling that you get, a feeling of because the product has nothing to offer, but you felt something good about it, and so you brought it, or you felt a likingness towards it, a sudden like towards about that product, and you brought it, and that may be the internal reason. So, another way of attribution is external and internal attributions. And so, within the product and service perception, I also have attributions of stability and attributions of controllability. Now, what is the attribution of stability? So, when I am giving reason to a particular product and particular a product or service, when I am providing reason why I am using a particular product or particular service, or why I am not using a particular product or particular service, and I am trying to perceive those products and services, or I am giving reasons for why I am liking it or don't liking it. Some kind of attributions can be done on terms of stability also. What is attribution of stability? It refers to the extent to which consumers attribute the cause of the product or service failure to one time event versus a stable event. So, sometimes products fail, or sometimes they pass. So, sometimes product fail, and when some person or when a consumer basically attributes or reasons that the product has failed is a one time thing, or does it fail every time, that kind of attribution, that kind of reasoning is called the attribution of stability. So, if it fails for only one time, maybe I like the product, maybe I will use the product over and over again because it has failed one time, or if I attribute the reason that this product has failed n number of times and is going to fail, and that product is not stable, so I will not use it. So, basically the failure of a product, whether it is related, it is a one time feature, or is it happening over and over again, it is a stable event. That is another way of attributing or reasoning which I can use for products and services, and that is how you perceive, or that is how you see products and services. The another kind of attribution that is there is called attribution of controllability. And what is this attribution? What is this reasoning process? It refers to the extent to which consumers attribute the causes of products or service failures to events that could have been controlled by the firm. And so, when you believe that the product and services failed not because of something that you had to do, but something that the firm could have done and they have not done it, and when you give that reasoning for not buying a product or not using a product, that is called the attribution of controllability. Here you believe that controllability the firm could have controlled, and the reasoning is that the control that the firm did not utilize, the firm did not embed into the product, the firm did not control that particular feature, and because of that the product failed. And so, if that is the reasoning you are providing, or that is the reasoning basis on which you are not using or using a service and product, that kind of attribution is called the attribution of controllability. Now, this was the perception of a particular product and services, and we saw several ways of attributing to or understanding why you liked a particular product or particular service. Then there is something also called self perception. Self perception is another form of perception which is very important in terms of consumer behavior, or how does the consumer actually reacting to the market. And what is self perception? The cause to which consumers attribute their own behavior are dimensions of their self perception. So, whenever you buy a particular thing, the reasoning that you give why you buy a particular thing, that their own behaviors are a dimension to their own self perception. So, sometimes you buy a thing and you like it because you have bought the thing, that kind of reasoning is called self perception. So, the reasoning that the consumer provides, the causes that the consumer provides, and when they attribute that their own behavior is the dimension to their self perception, that is what is called the idea of self perception. Now, researchers have shown that brand attitude and preference is influenced by self perception. The more higher self perception you have, the better you know yourself, the better you like the brand which matches yourself or which matches your level of self image. So, the brand image, the closer it is to your self image, the better you prefer the brand, and the better you have self perception about yourself, the better you see the image of the brand and the compatibility is there, and then you like the product. Now, if consumers perceive themselves as using a specific brand, they infer that they must like it, and so sometimes it happens that there is nothing in the brand that brand offers, but then sometimes people believe that since I am using it, I like it. There is a reverse reasoning. The reasoning is not because there is something good in the product and so I am liking it. It is the fact that since I am using it, so as I am using it, it is not cause any disturbance, so I might like it, and that is the kind of reasoning it is there. So, basically self perception is to deal with the fact that how nicely a person sees himself, his self image, and how closely he can see it or map it with the product, and that could be one of the perception types which are out there. The another factor, another kind of perception which can be dealt here is something called person perception. And what is person perception? Person perception is basically how do you perceive other people, like manufacturers, like service retailers, like service agents. How do you perceive those people, or how does the perceptibility of those people go about? So, person perceptions are the inferences consumers make about reasons behind actions of others. So, why does somebody external of you behave in a certain way? That kind of perception is called person perception. Take an example, you go to a particular shop and you buy and you are looking at a variety of, so you go to a clothes showroom and you are buying a variety of products or looking at variety of dresses which are there, and so suddenly this person comes to you and then he compliments to you on your dress. Now, the way you perceive this person, the way you perceive this person's intention, if you perceive it positively, you will perceive that that brand positively, and you will perceive the dress positively, and you will have positive feelings about it. But if you think that there was a sarcastic comment, there was some untruthfulness in the person, in the salesperson who came and complimented you, then you will not like that brand, you will not like that outlet, and you will dwell away, or you will move away from that particular product. And so, how you perceive other people's action into the marketplace is what is called perception of persons. So, people use several kind of principles in person perception, and so one principle is called the discounting principle. The consumer decides that external pressures are provoking the salesperson to act in a certain way. So, in discounting principle, what happens is, suppose you go to a store and so you see a salesperson, and this salesperson has maybe had a very good talk or a bad talk with his sales manager, and so he is not happy about it. And so, when you go ask him about certain things, so he replies to you, although politely, but in a slightly rudish manner. Now, how do you perceive this situation? Now, what reasoning do you provide? If the reasoning that you provide is that this person may have a bad day, or he had a bad interaction with the sales manager, and that is the reason why he is in a bad mood. In those cases, if you believe that some external pressure is making him do that particular act of not responding to you in a courteous way or not fulfilling the things that you want, that is called discounting principle. So, you discount his behavior towards an external pressure. And then there is something called the argumentation principle, which believes that the consumers argument the weight of salesperson's recommendation. So, basically, depending on how true they are, they will argument that. So, in those cases, how the salesperson does the recommendation, how courteous you are, that will basically decide how you are going to particularly buy a product. So, some salesman comes to you, and let us say you go to a marketplace, and so if in a shoe store, and this person comes to you, the salesperson comes to you and says that, look, there is a Nike sale and it is very good, and then basically the shoes are very expensive and so on and so forth, but all said and done, I would not buy a Nike, because although it is very good, but then I will always buy let us say some other brand, but these are the facts which are with Nike. So, in a Nike store, if the salesperson is offering you some other view, and an honest view, what people do is that they argument or they weigh this salesperson's recommendation, saying that he is telling the truth, and so no matter what the fact is that he should be loyal to his brand, the fact is he is getting money from the brand, but since he is being true, he is being honest, you weigh that weight, you weigh that person's opinion, and you accordingly change your decision, and that is called the argumentation principle. So, in discounting principle, you believe that whatever the salesperson is doing is through an external pressure, and in argumenting principle, what you tend to do is you look at whether the salesperson is honest or not, and if he is honest, if you weigh that the fact that he is giving to you is an honest opinion, you actually subscribe to it and you make the purchases according to it. Another thing in perception that happens in social psychology, we discuss something called the fundamental attribution error. And what is fundamental attribution error? The fundamental attribution error says that whenever making reasoning, whenever we provide reasoning to a particular fact, to a particular event that has happened, it is generally we consider that situations are very less important and people are more important. So, if an event has happened, let us say a car accident has happened. So, you are seeing a road which is filled with snow and a car is passing by, and suddenly you see an accident happening. Now, chances are if people commit this for fundamental attribution error, generally saying that it is the driver who is responsible for the accident, it is not the snowy road, and this is called the fundamental attribution error. So, fundamental attribution error is that particular feature in which the environmental situation, the environment which is around you is discounted, is not lowered in terms of the cause, and persons are held responsible for all kind of causes, and that is called fundamental attribution error in person. So, people generally make this kind of a person. So, something fails, it is the person who is responsible rather than the environment which is responsible. So, if a particular machine fails, if a particular product fails, you believe that the person who has sold you, the manufacturer who has sold you, it is responsible, and it is not you who is responsible, and it is not the environment which has caused that failure. So, that is called fundamental attribution error. And sometimes people tend to have something called the positivity bias. And what is positivity bias? Positive information about a single employee leads to the inferences that forms other employees are similar and positive. So, when a consumer is not highly educated, when a consumer has a lot of information about a product or product line or product brand information, what they tend to do is, if somebody gives them a positive feedback, somebody attains or tends to them in a positive way, they start expanding this positivity all around the brand, as well as the product line, as well as the manufacturer, and so on and so forth. So, they extend this positivity, they believe that everything is good about that product, right from the salesperson to the sales manager to the product manufacturer to the kind of products, and so on and so forth, and that is what is called productivity bias. That is the bias which is there. And so, that happens when consumer is less informed, he does not has a lot of information about the product or product line. Consumer inferences. So, how do consumers infer? How does consumer make meaningful abstracts or make meaningful interpretations out of stimuluses? Now, remember, in the first slide itself, I told you that perception is a three-part process. It starts with an exposure of a stimulus, goes to organization, that is what we were doing up till now, and then the inferences. How do we draw inferences? How do we make meaning out of it? And so, the next part that we are going to do is, how do consumers infer meaning? Up till now, consumers were giving reasons, up till now consumers were categorizing information, up till now consumers were perceiving information, but how do they attest meaning, or how do they generate meaning? How do they infer something valuable from the even information or the information which is there in front of them? So, consumers learn about products from a variety of sources, for example, advertising, promotion, word of mouth, and communication. So, the information about the products, the product information come to them through a lot of sources. Consumers learn about these from advertising. So, several kind of advertisement tell them about different kind of products, promotion messages are there, word of mouth messages are there, communication or ads are there, and so on and so forth. But consumers do not learn everything they need to know to help them judge these products. At times, even if consumers have all the information or a lot of information, they never have all the information, right. So, what happens is consumers never have all the information to judge a product, and so what they do is they do inferences. Why? Because every information is very difficult to collect, given the fact that there is a lot of information there, and given the cubic capacity of the brain, and given the enough motivation of the consumer, it is always a possibility the consumer will never have all the information. And so, when a consumer has enough information but does not have all the information, what he does is he does inferences, or he generates inferences, or he tries to guess of what could be and what could not be, and that is called consumer inferences. So, how this guessing is not the general guessing, it is a more scientific guessing, and this guessing process happens through process of induction and deduction. So, consumers fill in the remaining information by making inferences. So, consumers never have all the information about a particular product. So, you are buying a let us say you are buying a car, right, and so you go to a car company and they tell you a lot of things about the motor, about the engine, about the shape, dimension, and so on and so forth, but they will never be having all the information which is available, and for some parts you will actually go ahead and fill that information. For example, you might get information about how it works, how its shape is, how its dimension is, but some information will always be not there. And so, what consumers tend to do is in those cases they infer that okay, this is a good company, and so if this is a good company, whatever the height it is providing is good, right. So, I will not look at the height that the car has from the ground, how much high it is. I will infer that it is a good height, and so most things will not be it will not be crashing with most of the things. Or about certain dashboard design, I will infer that. So, about a particular dashboard design they might not explain, and so you infer from it, or particular kind of a seat variation that they do. Also, some of the things that consumer has information, some of the things they infer from it, and this process of inferences is what consumers use to gather all the messages, or to buy a particular product, or decide on a particular product and use that particular product. So, what kind of inferences are there? That is, inferences is basically extracting meaning out of perception, out of perceptual messages that the consumer has received. And so, there are two kinds of inferences that the consumer actually is involved with. One is called induction, the other is called deduction. And so, what is induction? Induction is the process in which consumers generalize from specific information to general conclusions. And so, what consumers do here is they generalize. So, consumers have a specific bit of information, and from that bit of information they generalize. Let us say that consumers have an information that a particular car comes from Germany, right, and so they then from there they generalize that Germany is a company which Germany is a country which actually has very good motor companies, and so they were very good manufacturers, they are very good in engineering, and so the car that they are buying, since it has a motor from Germany, it has something from Germany, it should be a very good car. And this process is called inferring, is called forecasting, or this is called consumer inferences. So, inferences generally are based on information. So, this inferences are based on some processes are used for making these inferences. One process for inferring is something called information integration. And so, what is information integration? It proceeds that consumers evaluate each product attribute separately and then combine these attributions into overall evaluation through the use of a simple algebraic rule such as adding or averaging. So, in information integration, what I do is I look at particular attributes, assign it a score, sum it up, and based on that I make the final choice. For example, let us say I am buying a brand of toothpaste. So, what I do is I look at the smell of the toothpaste and I will say I give it a 0.4. So, smell is 4, taste is 2, clean, how clean it is making your teeth is 4, and let us say its color is 3. And so, what I will do is the total summation of my product then becomes 4 plus 2, 5, 6, 10, 11, 12, 13 is 13. And so, my total toothpaste score is 13. This is called information integration. In information integration, what I do is I get bits and pieces of information about the particular product, all those information which are the determinant attributes. So, remember, when I am getting information, I am getting information only about the determinant attributes, and so I add that information together and I get a final score, and based on the final score I decide whether I will buy a toothpaste or not, and this is another process of information integration. So, based on how much score that I am getting, how high I am getting on each attribute, the probability of inferences will be there. So, from specific bits of information, so if the toothpaste scores high on all the scores, I will say it is a good brand. If it scores bad on the determinant attribute, I will say it is a bad brand. So, let us say there are 5 features I am using, 3 of which are determinant, 2 of this are non-determinant, and all 3 of them the toothpaste has higher scores, I will say the brand is good and I will buy the brand, and that is the inference that I have made. So, I have not used the toothpaste up till now, I have just gathered some information, and based on that I am making this inference. So, one process is called information integration. The other process of making inferences through through this in inductive reasoning is called heuristic based inferences. And so, what happens in heuristic based inferences? They uses a single piece of information to make information about the overall quality of the product. And so, here what happens is one criteria, one determinant criteria is used, and based on that determinant criteria it is decided whether I will particularly like a toothpaste or not. And so, let us say I use taste. So, what I will do is, if the taste of the toothpaste is very good, I will use it. If the taste of the toothpaste is herbal, if the taste of the toothpaste is like vegetables, is like cloves or something else, I will believe it is herbal, it is good for use, and so on and so forth. So, in contrast to what I did in information integration, where I take bits and pieces of determinants, I take a number of determinants, add their score, and based on that I make the final inferences. In terms of the heuristic, I look at just one factor, and based on that I make the inferences about the particular product. So, if it tastes good, it is herbal, if it is herbal, it is good, and so it is good, then I should buy it, and so on and so forth. And the third kind of inferencing that can be done is based on something called price quality inferences. Now, consumers inferences aspects of quality from the information about price, and so sometimes what consumers do is that based on price they make the inferences. So, the higher the price of a particular product, the better the quality, that kind of inferences is there. The lower the price, the lower the quality, because they believe that higher price is offered or a charge to them because everything that is there is of higher quality, is of higher value, and so integrating them together, making them requires a lot of cost, and that is the reason that the price is high. And so, that kind of inferencing in terms of price quality inferencing is called the price quality inference making. And in addition to that, there is another method of inferences that is used, and that is called the accessibility diagnosticity dimension. And in accessibility diagnostic inferences, what I do is, the more accessible or the more diagnostic the attribute is, the more accessible the attribute is, the more diagnostic the attribute is. Now, what is more accessible? When I think about a particular product, the easily I can think about a particular attribute about that particular product, the easier it is for me to decide. So, when I say about camera, good photography, that is the accessible product, and the more diagnostic that is, because good photography is the most diagnostic, most important feature of a camera. So, the most easily if I remember those features, or most easily that I remember these features, the better the product is thought to be. So, if I think about Nikon, what comes to mind? Good photography. If I talk about Canon, ease of use. If I talk about some other brand, something else. And so, the more easily that I remember these features, these product features which has been marketed by the consumer in the market, the more easily I remember it, the more diagnostic those features is, the better inferences that I can rate about that particular product, the higher the inference capacity for me for rating about that product. It is not only inferential reasoning that is used in consumer perceptions, but there is another form of reasoning that is generally used in product perceptions or in consumer perceptions, in helping consumers make decisions in the marketplace based on perceptions. And so, consumers also interpret information from product, information about product, or consumers also decode information about product also using deductive reasoning. So, in akin to what we did in inductive reasoning, where we went from specific to general, where specific bits of information was there, and from that information we forecasted we exaggerated, we kind of interpreted value of the product, or kind of interpreted more information about the product. In deduction, what we tend to do is we come from general to specific. Now, in deduction a lot of information is given to you, and from there you come to some bits of information or very specific information which is there. And so, in inferences the inductive reasoning is more of a bottom up process, where bits and pieces of information are added together to give you a very specific information, give you a general information. So, it is moving out, whereas it is diverging, and when you have general information, a lot of information, from there you come to specificity. It is bottom down process, or it is the process of converging. So, what is deduction? Deduction is when you come from general information to very specific information. So, deduction is the process of constructing specific conclusions from principles or assumptions. So, if you have a lot of information about a product, if a number of information is given to a product and you have all the information possible which is there, and from there you come to one specific conclusion, that is called deductive reasoning. So, what form of deductive reasoning are used? Attitude based inferences. Consumer often use their own general attitude towards a brand to make specific inferences about the quality of the specific brand. Based on whatever information that they get, and based on how they feel about using the product, decides consumers' attitude. And consumers look at their own attitude. Consumers look at how they behave towards a particular brand, and based on that they define the quality of the brand. So, based on what they believe or what their attitude towards a brand is, they believe the brand will be similar or the product will be similar, and other things related to that particular brand will also be similar. So, if a consumer believes that let us say Reliance phone is good or Reliance service is good, from there they will infer they will deduct that, they will have this idea that they have a very good a feeling about the Jio network or the Reliance network, and so Reliance is good, and that kind of inferences is based on specific things, based on a number of information they have concluded to one specific information. And sometimes consumers also do category based inferences. So, based on consumers attitude, if we infer or if we deduce inferences, this is a form of deductive inferences, that is called the consumer, that is called attitude based inferences. And in category based inferences, the example of a category based inference is a country of origin of deduction. So, if we tend to make inferences based on a particular category, let us say if something comes from I am making inferences about Honda, and Honda comes from Japan, and the fact that Japan is a country which is good in terms of technology, and it is a company which is with punctuality, and people are very hard working, and so the product will also be hard working, and so on and so forth. If that kind of inference is done, that is called category based inferences. What I have done is I have taken country of origin as a category, and based on that I have inferred about the particular specific Honda car. In the other case, what I have done is my attitude towards a particular product, my attitude of how I feel towards a particular company or product, that makes me infer about that particular brand or specific quality of that particular brand. So, two kinds of reasoning that can be used. Now, perception of products and service quality. So, perception of product quality first of all. So, how do we perceive the product quality? Perception of quality of durable consumer goods. So, how do we perceive durable consumer goods? The durable consumer goods are perceived with ease of use, how easy it is for using that good. If the more easier a product is, the more easier a product offers to be, easier of use of product is, the more better a product is. Versatility. How much versatile a particular product is. The more number of problems it can solve for you, the better a product is. The lesser number of problems it can solve to you, the poorer the product is, or poorer the product quality is. Durability. How durable is the product? The more durable a product is, the longer time it can stay with it, the longer pressures it can take, the better the product is. The lower the durability, the lower the number of pressure it can take, the worse the product is. Serviceability. How much serviceable the product is. So, can it be made, if something goes wrong, can it be serviced? How much it is offering for service productions, or how much serviceability that the product has, can it be improved upon, and if the more it is, the better the product is known to be, the better the quality of the product is known to be, otherwise the poorer it is known to be. Performance. How is the product performing? If the product is performing poorly, if the product is not performing according to marks for you, then what happens, the product is taken as poor performance and it is not taken as a good product, the quality is inferred bad, but if it is performing nicely then it is a good quality product. And prestige, when you use the product, how much social prestige that you get, how much compliments that you get from other people. The more prestige that you get, the more compliments that you get, the better the product is, the lesser compliments that you get, the poorer the product is. And so, these are some of the factors that has been used for defining the perception of quality of a durable consumer good. In terms of service quality, there are two conceptualizations. So, service quality, in terms of service industry, for service industries there are two factors which are used for making perceptions about the quality of service of a particular product, and there is something called the Nordic perspective and there is something called the American perspective. So, what is the Nordic perspective? Since this perspective actually started in Norway, it was developed in Norway, it is called Nordic perspective. And what is this perspective says? Functional quality represents how the service is delivered. And so, products or services are rated on their functional quality. How the service is delivered is a functional quality, how it is given to you, the ease with which a particular product service is given to you, the better functionality it offers to you, how easily you get that, how much effort you have to do determines the quality of a service. And technical quality reflects the outcome of the service act. So, functionality is functional quality is in what way the service is delivered to you, whereas what is the outcome, what is the final product of the service, what is after using the service, what is the final product that you are going to get, what is the final satisfaction that you are going to get, that is the technical quality. So, in terms of the Nordic perspective, the functional quality, which is the way the service is delivered to you, how courteous the people are, how efficiently it is delivered to you, how quickly it is delivered to you, whereas the technical quality reflects the final outcome. When you get the service, what is the final outcome that you get, whether you get a whole service or a good satisfaction out of it, and so on and so forth, will be the service quality. There is an American perspective to this also, an American perspective to service quality, and that has to do with reliability. How much the service is reliable. The more reliable a service is, the more reliable a service industry is, the better the service industry. Empathy, how much empathy does the service has for you, the service provider has for you. The more empathy that is there, more number of people empathize with you, something goes wrong, the more empathy that they show, the better the service provider is, the higher quality the service is. Assurance, how much assurance they are giving to you, how much you are assured of the fact that if something fails, people will come helping for you. The more assurance of this is given to you by the public, by the particular service provider, the better the chances of you accepting the higher quality you believe that particular service is or service manufacturer is or service provider is. Tangibles, what is the tangible output that you are getting, what is the service actually giving you. So, the better the tangibles that you get, the more consistent tangibles that you get, the better the services or service qualities tend to be. And responsiveness, how much responsive is the particular company or the service provider. The higher responsiveness it shows, the better the service provider, the lower responsiveness that it shows, the worse the service provider is. So, there are a number of factors which affect the quality of a service that you get. So, we are not talking about products now, we are talking about services now. So, a number of factors affect the service quality, and so it is in terms of interaction, in terms of environment, and in terms of outcome. In terms of interaction, so interaction is when a person interaction with a service provider. On those there are certain categories. What is the attitude of the service provider? If the attitude of the service provider is positive towards you, if the service provider has a positive attitude, is a confirming attitude towards you, the service provider is or the services provider is thought to be of good quality. What is the behavior of the service provider? If the behavior of the service provider is very good, then you think that service to be of a very good nature and you are positive towards it and you believe the service is of high quality. What is the expertise? If the expertise are not there, if the service provider does not have the required kind of expertise in your interaction with it, in that interaction with that person who is providing you the service, then you believe that he is of lower quality. The higher the expertise is there, the higher the service quality or the higher the service is rated in your mind. In terms of environmental factors, what is the ambient condition in which the service is being provided to you? If the service is provided to you in an ambient condition which is not conducive, in a very haphazard ambient condition, the service is attractive to you, and you will not rate it to a higher quality. What is the facility design? Wherever the service you are getting, what is the design of the facility? The more number of service benefits that you get, the more number of benefits that you get, the more number of features that the facility that is offering you the services has, the better the service is rated. Social conditions. What are the social conditions in that? What kind of people come in there? If a lot of people are there in the service, where you are getting the service, then it becomes too crowded, and so on. One-to-one interaction is not possible, and the service quality is lowerly rated. But if there is a one-to-one interaction, if you have one person interacting with one person, and the number of person in the social situation is managed in a way so that you have one-to-one interaction, it is of higher quality service. Similarly, what is the outcome of the service? The waiting time, how much waiting time that you have to spend before getting the final product. So, if the longer the waiting time, the longer the waiting time before a service is offered to you, the lower the quality of the service is believed to be. Tangible evidence, what kind of tangible things that you get out of the service? The better the tangible things, the more number of tangible things that you get out of the service, the better it is looked at. And valence, how do you feel? If you feel positively balanced after using the service, if you are using a service and you feel better, you feel excited after using it, or while interacting with it, or the final outcome of the service gives you a positive balance, you feel the service to be of higher quality, otherwise it is of a lower quality. Now, how do people perceive risk? Risk perception and risk reduction. How do people perceive risk with the use of a particular product and service, and how do they reduce this risk? So, this overall risk perception is dependent on two factors: severity of adverse consequences and uncertainty of adverse consequences. Now, if a product fails, how much risk do you perceive with it? So, that depends upon how much severe the consequences is. If the product fails and it does not have too much severe of consequences, then lower risk is perceived with that particular product, or how much uncertain related consequences are. If a service fails, if a product fails, how much uncertainty was there with the failure of this and related items with that. The more the uncertainty is there, the higher the higher the risk is perceived, and lower the chances of you going for that particular product. Types of adverse consequences. What kind of adverse consequences can happen? Performance risk. The product does not perform the way you wanted it to perform. Safety risk, the product that you brought or the service that you brought gives to you some kind of safety issues. Financial risk, a lot of money goes into it, and so it does not perform the way you want it to perform. Social risk, when you buy that product, people do not appreciate you, do not give you enough prestige, and you are not socially accepted. Psychological risk, the mental agony after buying the product, the mental anxiety after buying the product is very high, and so you do not and you cannot risk it, and so that is the reason you do not look at the product. And so these are the adverse condition. Time or convenience risk, the time and convenience of a particular product, the amount of time that you invest in buying a particular product, the convenience that it is offered, where it is offered and how it is offered, if it is high, in those cases the risk is very high. And opportunity loss risk, whether you believe that if you do not buy, whether it leads to a loss of opportunity is another factor which is there. And so, this risk perception is related to these factors. There are two important factors: what is the severity and what is the uncertainty, and these are the number of adverse consequences that can happen, or the adverse how severe these consequences are and how uncertain they are. Based on that, the number of risk is performed. So, these adverse consequences multiplied by the uncertainty will define the risk. The more the higher the uncertainty and the more severe the adverse consequences, the higher the risk, and this lesser the uncertainty, higher the adverse risk, still the risk will be low. So, that is how the relation is. So, if the uncertainty is high, definitely the risk will be high. If the uncertainty is low, the risks tend to be low, but it also depends upon the consequences of how much severe the consequences. And how do people reduce this risk taking strategies? Provide information. The marketer can provide a lot of information about the product, contingent information or confirmatory information about the product, and that could reduce the risk. Brand loyalty. Brand loyalty is another factor which could reduce the risk. The more number of people they are brand loyal, they reduce the risk for particular product. Decision delay. what marketers can do is they can lower this decision delay. They can provide all kind of information and all kind of policies, so that the decisions are taken instantly. Purchase warranty. The marketers can give warranty to purchases, which can improve the number of purchases, or which can improve the probability of purchase. Purchase of brand with satisfaction. Purchase of brand with satisfaction will reduce the risk of buying, and so once you have a brand which gives you enough satisfaction, you become brand loyal to it and you become satisfied with it, and so purchasing it will reduce the risk. And seeking advice from personal sources. You can also seek advice from personal sources like friends, like your acquaintances, your family, and they can also give you some information about what product to buy and not, and that way you can perceive or can have lower risk or perceive lower risks. So, categories of risk perception, we have looked at performance risk, we have looked at financial risk, social risk, psychological risk, time and convenience risk, and opportunity risk. So, what is performance risk? Performance risk is that if the product does not perform the way you want it to be. Financial risk is related to the fact that a lot of money goes into it and a lot of finance is wasted. Physical risk is to the fact that some physical damage, or you get some physically harm by using the particular product. And social risk is related with how much esteem or how much prestige you get into the social world of people around you. Psychological risk is related to what kind of mental agony or mental anxiety will the buyer of the product will lead to. Time and convenience risk will relate to how much time you are spending to a particular product, buying the particular product, and how much convenience it is, with convenience it is offered, how much work from your side you have to do to buy that product. And opportunity loss risk is how much opportunity you are losing on buying that product, or how much the opportunity loss will lead you to losses, how much losses the opportunity that you do not take will actually incur to you. And the next is perception of switching cost. So, this is to relate with switching cost. So, sometimes consumers switch brands, and so how do a person perceive this switching cost of switching from one brand to another. And so, what it is believed that consumers perceiving greater switching costs tend to continue using the service provider they are already doing business with. So, basically if the user of a particular service understands that by switching they are going to lose a lot of risk is there in switching, a lot of time and energy will be wasted, or a lot of finance will be wasted in switching, the higher the switching cost will be and the lower the chances that they will switching. So, the greater switching cost, the greater the switching cost of a particular person sees, the higher the chances that they will continue using it. There are three types of switching. You have procedural switching, you have financial switching, and you have relational switching cost. Procedural switching cost is to do with what are the procedures that you have to take in terms of switching. So, when you are switching from one brand to another brand, or one service provider to another provider, what is the procedure that you have to go through, what kind of forms you have to fill, what kind of places that you have to visit, and so on and so forth. Financial switching cost is what kind of money that you have to put into switching a particular brand. And third is the relational switching cost, what kind of relationship or what kind of relational factors you will lose. So, if you or if you had very good relation with a particular service provider, if you switch this, what kind of other relational the new provider that you are going to, what kind of cost you are incurring to that, what kind of switching cost you are going to incur to that, and so that kind of fact is relational switching cost. And so, the higher these costs are, the more these costs are, the lower the chances that people will lead to switching. Then there is something called, lastly we will look into something called price perception. And so, what is price perception? Price perception, how do people perceive price? So, consumers evaluate the price tag of a specific brand by comparing that price with an internal reference price. What happens is, most consumers have a reference price, they have a price of a thing. So, suppose you are going to buy a Honda car, let us say tomorrow, and you have 7 lakhs as the internal, you see an ad and that says you 7 lakh as the price of that particular car. So, when you go there actually to buy the car, you get an offer price of say 8 lakh, right. And so, when you go there to buy the car, the price that you see on TV was 7 lakh and or information messages were 7 lakh, and when you go there it is 8.5 lakh or 8 lakh or 8.5 lakh. How close this is to the price that you have as a reference, right. So, there can be 3 or 4 situations out of it. So, one situation is, let us say you go there and 7 lakh was what the price you saw, and the product is being offered to you in 8.5 lakh. You go there and the product is being offered to you, 7 lakh was the cost and it is offered to you in 7.5 lakh, and sometimes you go there the product is being offered to you in 6.8 lakh, and so on. And so, 3 or 4 situations can emerge. So, basically how closely, and your reference price was 7 lakh only, and you also included some ahead of it, say from 6.8 lakh to 7.5 lakh is what I am ready to pay. This is the reference price. So, how closely this reference price is the brand, specific brand is evaluated in terms of that. So, consumers evaluate the price tag of a specific brand by comparing the price with an internal reference price, how closely the internal reference price matches the price tag of a particular thing. Now, there is something called social judgment theory which works here, which states that people attribute meaning to incoming information by matching this information to a mental category or referent. So, in social categorization theory, there are 2 things that has to be considered. One is called the the latitude of affirmation, and there is something called the latitude of contrast. And so, the latitude of assimilation is that that area which is set up by the across the reference price. So, let us say if the consumer sees a price of 7 lakh of a Honda car, and so he believes that 6.8 to 7.5 is what he is going to invest for the Honda car, and if the price of the car in the showroom falls in this region, this is called the assimilation zone. And this social judgment theory has something called the assimilation zone and the contrast zone. So, things which is in the assimilation zone, they are accepted and they are brought, and so if the price of 7 lakh, the region of 6.8 to 7.5 which the consumer's reference is, if the price of the car falls below it, it falls in his assimilation zone and the consumer buys it. But suppose the price of the car falls at say 8.5 lakh, 7 lakh is what he saw and 7.5 lakh is what his thing is, 6.8 lakh. If the price falls in 8.5 lakh, the price of the car falls on his contrast zone, and he is not going to buy that particular product. But if the price of the product falls at 6.8 lakhs, or he goes to the market and finds out the 7 lakh car is costing 6.8 lakh, this is called a bargain, and he will buy the price, because this again falls into his region of assimilation. So, region of assimilation is an extension of the region, or we could call it a region of acceptance for the consumer. And so, if a price falls in the region of assimilation, or if anything falls within the information falls within the region of assimilation, the consumer actually accepts it. But if information falls outside his region of assimilation, which is called the region of contrast, he will not accept it. That is called the social judgment theory, and so price perception is done in this way. And as I was saying, the assimilation region is the area around the referent in which the incoming information is categorized as similar to that of the referent. So, the 6.8 lakh to 7.5 lakh, which is around the referent, which is 7 lakh, is what is called the region of assimilation. If the price falls in this, he will buy that particular product. But if it falls outside this, then it falls into the contrast region. So, the contrast region is the area in which the incoming information is categorized as different from the referent, and so the consumer will not buy that. And so, prices are also, price perception happens in terms of this kind of thing, in terms of the referent price. Also, referent price are influenced by aspiration price, expected price, previously paid price, expected future price, fair price, recalled price, reservation price, normal market price, highest and lowest price, and contextual price. So, all of these are the influences. The aspiration price is what is the aspiration of what the consumer has aspired. So, reference price is decided by that. It is also influenced by previous price paid, so how much you have paid for a car like that before. Fair price is what you believe that what is the cost of manufacturing and all the cost of putting up the car in the showroom and that kind of a thing. And recall price is what you recall from your memory, what is the last time you bought a particular car and how much the price was. And so, whether you recall that reservation price is what is the reservation that you had for a particular thing, how much high you can go with it. Expected price is the price that you are expecting out of a particular brand of car, looking at the features that it has. The expected future price is that price that you expect the car to have in future. If you are going to sell it, what is the amount of price that you are going to get of it. Normal market price is the price that you believe that should be of the particular brand. Highest and lowest prices, these are the two cutoff prices that you set for any particular. So, it is two on both sides of your assimilation region. And contextual prices in comparison to some other brand, how much price is this particular brand going to offer to me, and that is called the contextual price. So, this is basically how people decide price or how people perceive information about price. So, in this particular lecture, what we did was we looked at how perceptions of price, how perceptions of the quality and services take place into the marketplace and how it influences the consumer. Beside that, we also looked at how consumers make attributions or reasoning, how consumers reason various things that are going into the marketplace, reasons various events which are going into the marketplace. We also looked at something called the inferencing which the consumer does, and this inferencing is necessary because this inferencing actually tells how the consumer assimilates information. So, basically the process of assimilating information or extracting information from market stimuli is called inferences, and we looked at two different kind of inferences which is there. We looked at inferences of deduction type and inferences of induction type. So, in this particular lecture we wrapped up what we started in lecture number 10. So, in this 11th lecture we wrapped up what we started there, and we looked at how does perception or consumer perception actually help the consumer in making decisions, in deciding what to buy into the marketplace, and how does the factor perception actually help the consumer in making wise choices into the market and buying things that he really needs. We will meet again in the next lecture. We will be looking at more cognitive factors related to learning and memory, and how learning and memory actually help the consumer in making fruitful decisions into the marketplace and buying the product that they need. So, for now, from here it is thank you and goodbye.